When you share something with your provider, what can actually be exposed about you? Who can know the tea? And can your employer just call up and find out the truth about what you've been doing for the last year? Welcome to the Voluntary Admission podcast. In the clinical world, a voluntary admission is just paperwork, but in real life, it's the bravest moment of your life. It's the moment you choose to stop hiding, drop the weight of pretending you're okay, and say, I need help. But navigating the mental health system to actually get that help can feel incredibly overwhelming. That's why this show is here. My name is Ali, and I am pulling back the curtain on the behavioral health industry to make sense of it all, so everyone can get the care that they need and we can improve care for all. Welcome. Hello, my name is Ali from Cali, and welcome to the Voluntary Admission podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the truth about confidentiality. When you share something with your provider, what can actually be exposed about you? Who can know the tea? And can your employer just call up and find out the truth about what you've been doing for the last year? We're going to talk all about that. When it comes to the history of HIPAA, which is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, when it comes to the history of all of this stuff, I'm not going to get into that. I just want to give you some short-term peace of mind about whether or not the information that you share in treatment, whether it's therapy or you're at an outpatient clinic because you have mental health problems right now, I just want to give you some short-term peace of mind to know if it's safe to discuss your issues, to discuss what's been, holding you back in life and the emotional pain that you've experienced. You have to bring it to the surface, you have to bring it to the light and shine a light on it, and that's the only time that things can heal. I want to talk to you about support on seedsofgenesis.com. I am launching Seeds of Genesis communities, so if you are in Southern California, and even if you're not, we're going to have some Zoom meetings as well. I just want to bring in community back to this world because the disconnection, the isolation, and all the chronic stress that people are going through, it's much harder, much more difficult to go through those things. It's much more emotionally and mentally taxing to go through those things when you don't have community. We are going to be launching communities for so many different topics, whether it's single mothers, whether it's burnt out college students, LGBTQ needing support. If you're in recovery and just needing a community, we are going to have communities specifically tailored to what everyone needs. And if there's a community that doesn't exist that you want to start or that you hope someone else starts, let us know. We will train people to run workshops, train people to run community groups. If you're interested in launching a group, if you're interested in being a part of this in any sort of way, wanting community, wanting to build community, wanting to be a part of a community because you understand that the world is so disconnected and it's so icky, please go to seedsofgenesis.com and go to the support page and get on the wait list. I will be communicating regularly with the people who join the wait list, and we're going to be brainstorming because I want this to be a community resource created by people in the community, not just one person or a small group of people. I want the community to decide. So check out that resource. So let's talk about the truth about confidentiality. Whatever you share in treatment is confidential, right? Whether it's your intake assessment, whether it's your therapy session, whether you're in a group treatment session with other people who are also seeking treatment, whether you're meeting with your case manager, that's confidential, right? They say that. And then there are these instances where they say it's not confidential. So anytime where you express that you may be a danger to hurting yourself, you're going to hurt yourself, you're going to hurt someone else. Any instances of abuse, child abuse, adult dependent abuse, or elderly abuse, any signs of that, or if you explicitly share that, at that point, that information cannot continue to be confidential because someone's at risk of being harmed or currently being harmed. The only reason that confidentiality is broken is to keep someone safe, keep you or someone else safe. So what is confidentiality? Just means that everything you share is private. And again, those are the only instances where it will no longer be private. Cases of abuse, you're going to hurt yourself or you plan to hurt someone else, or you're at risk of hurting yourself or hurting someone else. If someone is currently being abused, a child, an adult dependent, or an elder, the provider can no longer keep that confidential. But one of the things that I've heard some clients say is if their case manager knows something or if another clinical supervisor knows something, they broke HIPAA. Well, if they all work at the same place, if they are considered to be part of your treatment team, for example, if you're in a residential program or you're in a PHP program, an IOP program for mental health, eating disorder, something like that, your treatment team is there to support you. So information shared between the treatment team, the purpose of it is to know how to support you more, how to help you better. Are there any resources that you need? Are there any new goals that need to be created? Are there any pieces of information that the treatment team should know so they can make sure that they're making the experience better for you, or to correct themselves and make sure they're not making it worse for you? Information shared between the treatment team is not confidential. So it's not like your case manager can't share with your primary counselor, or they can't share with your therapist. That's your treatment team. So, because I've heard multiple people say that, I think most people understand that. Actually, I know most people understand that, but I've heard a few saying they violated HIPAA because they shared something that they had to share. So, for example, even in substance use treatment, you can't hide from the treatment team, and only one person can know that you're actively using a substance. And that's not to get you in trouble. That's because you're there for substance use treatment. So when you make that disclosure, a treatment plan will be developed to help you get back on track. So that's not a violation of HIPAA. Now let's talk about mandated reporting, which I briefly just spoke about, but all mental health providers, behavioral health providers, are mandated reporters. If there's any signs of abuse, child abuse, adult dependent abuse, or elderly abuse, that they are required to report it. That's to protect anyone being abused and themselves, because if it comes out that they did not report that, and they should want to report it even if it is uncomfortable, then they can be held liable because they didn't share that information. And if something happens, then they were essentially a part of the right people not knowing that in order to help whoever is currently being harmed. And when it comes to consent forms, there's something called a consent form or a release of information, ROI. Depending on where you work or where you're receiving treatment, it may be called something different. But essentially, you have to give the facility, you have to give the provider permission to share your confidential information with others. So whether that's your mother, father, spouse, whether that's your psychiatrist who is not connected to that facility or clinic, maybe your doctor, your primary care provider. In order for them to be able to share information with such people, those are just examples, you have to fill out a form with their information, their number, their name, and you have to sign it. If there is no consent form in place, if there is no release of information in place, then if they come calling to whatever the facility is, they cannot confirm or deny that you're seeking treatment there. So if you've heard that before, which I say I can't confirm or deny to be funny in everyday conversations, but if you're calling somewhere, like say your parent or your daughter is in treatment, if there's no ROI in place, or they could not be there, right? But they cannot tell you if they're there. They can't tell you if they're not there because there's no ROI in place. And so say you call somewhere because you suspect someone's there and they say, I can't confirm or deny. It's not necessarily that they're there. They may not be there, but what you do know is that there's no ROI in place. The other thing too about consent forms is that you are not required as an adult to complete any consent forms that you don't want to. So maybe your provider may encourage you to involve someone else in your treatment, whether, family, even other providers. Like I said, common ones are like a psychiatrist, maybe even a therapist that you see somewhere else. But you don't have to. It's up to you. I know I've had clients, I was just asked them, hey, do you want someone to be a part of your treatment? And most will say yes or no, or yeah, of course. But I've had a few kind of go on like a rant of, oh no, I don't want them to be a part of it, and this is why, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to. I'm like, this has nothing to do with me. This is your treatment. So whatever you want, I don't even get involved in that conversation. I just say, hey, this is just an opportunity to get some more support, particularly in substance use treatment and any sort of addiction really that you go through. It's so easy for what I call the virus to implant in your mind and for you to start going a little bit haywire. So it can be helpful to have people in your life a part of your treatment so you can snap out of it. Say you stop showing up and you just go AWOL. Maybe if mama reaches out to you, that may be a tool for you to use to kind of snap out of it. And I don't blame anyone for that virus implanting and starting that process of like kind of going haywire, because that's just the nature of the beast. So that's an example of where it can be a tool. But if you don't want your spouse to know, you don't want your girlfriend to know, your boyfriend, you don't have to. What about your employer? What about your pastor in the community? What about some community organization that you're a part of? How can they find out whether or not you're in treatment, whether or not you've had a mental breakdown, whether or not their suspicions about some of your issues are true? How can they just call and find out what's going on? Short answer, they cannot. They cannot just call up and find out where you are. Your employer will not know unless you share it with them, or unless someone in your life shares it with them, like without your permission. But there's no way that if you work at the local construction company, or you work at whatever local organization, that they could just call up and be like, hey, can you tell me if John Adams is in treatment, and why are they there? Have they ever used drugs on the job? Or was it true that they were 5150? Is it true that they have depression and that's why they keep calling out? They can't do that unless you have explicitly filled out a consent form or an ROI, which is the same thing. No one can know. They genuinely cannot know. It's actually illegal for the facility to share any information, illegal for the provider to share any information with someone that you have not consented for them to share information with. I know your random coworker cannot find out the tea of what you've been talking about, or they can't even know if you're even there if there's no consent form. Now let's talk about revoking consent. If you sign a consent form and you change your mind, you can change your mind at any time. Usually consent forms will expire within a year, but if before that year's over, if you sign it and then 2 weeks later you change your mind, you can revoke that consent. That is your right to ask someone seeking treatment. You don't have to be forced to sign any consents. Now, if you're in legal trouble and you have, for example, like a probation officer or parole officer, and they need you to sign a consent, okay, yeah, the facility can honor your request, but I don't know if your PO would be okay with that. If you say that, oh, I don't want to give my PO access to my information, or I don't want to give this person access to my information, and they're like, no, you have to. If someone outside is requiring you to do that, I would get an attorney, honestly. So let's talk about the importance of honesty in treatment. You never have to share anything that you do not want to share. It is to your benefit to be honest, but if you're not comfortable for some reason, no one can force you to share about anything that you do not want to share. And I bring this up because, especially if you're going through something so isolating and so scary, whether it's suicidal ideation or you've been through something that's a traumatic event, it really would be worth your while to explore why you don't feel comfortable. And if it's that provider, if it's that facility, finding somewhere where you do feel comfortable. Because let's talk about something like suicidal ideation. That is something that in secrecy and in silence and in isolation only gets worse. And your life is important. You don't deserve to just be in a very dark hole where you don't want to live anymore. And I know it can be scary to open up about that kind of thing, but trust me, I know that those thoughts, they only get louder and scarier and more frightening when they're not shared. And so maybe, yeah, you don't feel comfortable telling your parents, or maybe even your spouse, your girlfriend, your boyfriend. It is so important to share it with someone, because darkness only grows, but darkness and light, that's when you can start to see the light. That's when you could start to explore ways to kind of take advantage of resources to slowly but surely get better. That won't happen if you're keeping it a secret and keeping it to yourself. So I'm not saying to start a live video and tell people. I'm telling you to go to somewhere where you feel comfortable. And if you're nervous about seeking a provider, the one thing to know, the whole theme of this episode is that it's confidential. So if you want to tell everything and you just want to leave and never speak to them again, it's confidential. No one in your personal life can just call up and say, hey, what did they say? Or, hey, I just want to confirm, I saw a charge in their account. Were they ever here? They cannot do that. but your life does mean something. And so if you're someone who's been struggling with passive suicidal ideation, or you're currently in crisis, make sure to reach out. So if you feel like in the moment right now, or if you have ever felt this way, it is valuable to call a resource like 988. I remember when I first heard about a suicide hotline, I saved the number in my phone, and there were times where I probably should have called, but I didn't have anyone doing a video like this to tell me, just call. Because at that time, I was like, you know what? This will probably go away. Or you know what? It's not that big of a deal. If the minute I call, then that means it's real. And that's not a game to play when it comes to your life. Your life is important. And even though suicidal ideation can feel like something that's a you problem, it has nothing to do with anyone else, you owe it to yourself. The fact that you've gotten so far to this point dealing with that, you owe it to yourself to live a quality of life. Because even if you're still living and breathing, maybe you haven't done anything, or maybe you did something and it wasn't successful. That's a really agonizing way to live. It's an agonizing way to live, to feel miserable and to feel like life sucks and like your life doesn't matter and you would be better off just gone. And so I want you to save that number in your phone. Whatever, 988 is one. If there's a local crisis resource in your area, look for them and save them in your phone. And if you are feeling that now, call now, because your life does mean something. And I know you may even entertain the ideas of like, oh, it's not going to help me. That is self-sabotage, and that is a very unhealthy way to think. I want you to start shining a light on your darkness so that you can move into a better phase of your life, a happier, a healthier, just an overall better phase of your life. And I don't want you to self-sabotage by isolating yourself and saying, I don't think they can help me. Doesn't matter. All those thoughts don't matter. What really matters is just taking that one step of shining a light on what you're going through. And years I had that a number, I don't even remember what it is. I probably can look in my phone and find out what it is. I have that number saved in my phone. And I remembered years later when things got really, really dark and bad, I said, you know what, girl, just do it. And I'm so glad that I did, because who I ended up speaking to was awesome. And I know there's maybe some reputation or maybe some rumors that you've heard from others that some of the counselors that you may end up calling are not great. That doesn't matter, because it is still, that shouldn't really be a concern of yours. If you don't like them, hang up and call back to someone else. But the importance is, when you're in a really dark space, those ideas amplify and magnify to scary levels, and you don't want to put yourself in harm's way. And so you really do need to expose what you're going through to somewhere where they can actually provide some sort of short-term resources for you. Now, another thing I want to touch on are your treatment team within a facility. When you are seeking treatment and you've been told that, okay, this is your treatment team, here's your case manager, these are your group facilitators, this is your therapist, like something like that, then who can know your information? Well, the same guidelines apply that I touched on before, but I want to touch on something else, which is, are people just going to be gossiping and kikiing at what you say? I do think that that is a concern for a lot of people. If you say to one of your counselor who you really trust, you have rapport with, and you don't want anyone to know that you had a crush on Justin Bieber, or that you had a crush on so-and-so from 5th grade, and they just popped up in your apartment building and you've been avoiding them and you don't even know if they recognize you, and you're so embarrassed, you can request with that provider, that individual, to keep that between you and them. If you had the bubble guts this morning and you really, and you're fine now, you're healthy, you're safe, you went to the doctors, they gave you some medication and that's all resolved, and you're just happy to be there, and you're like, hey, I don't want you to share that with anyone else, you can request that and they can honor that. Now, if it ends up being important information that has to do with, again, something along the lines of needing to be reported, that puts you in harm's way or puts someone else in harm's way, then they have to use their discretion. They have to abide by their ethics as a provider to then share that. But yeah, if you want to say, you know what, that my mailman, every time I see him, he reminds me of my ex, and I'm thinking, you know, I still have a crush on him. I may reach out. And that's just something that you want to request for them to just keep between you and them and not be shouting around with the treatment team and kicking and gossiping. Like that is up to you. Like, you can request that, and a good provider will honor that if it doesn't interfere with your safety. But then again, they are not obligated to. I know this comes up a lot when clients don't like other providers, like in the facility. They don't like certain staff members, because I'm going to just talk about my treatment experience. I'm not even going to talk about my professional experience right now. I know we had some off the chain people on staff. It's so funny because my last episode 1, was all about what to expect in residential treatment. And I almost want to do an addendum to that episode, because I just found something that I wrote after I left treatment, like probably either during treatment or 1 to 2 days after I left, complaining about things that happened there. And like I said in my last episode, I had a mostly positive experience, but things did start to go left, and I'm grateful for the experience. But part of it was some of the staff was just very immature and odd, and the facility didn't really handle it well, which is, yeah, we're going to talk about that more on this podcast. Facilities not handling their staff, and just because it's like, you already paid. If we don't really need to handle them, and unless it's an ethical dilemma that's going to affect our money, we're not going to handle it. Whatever. But yeah, so sometimes things like that will happen where you're like, I cannot stand my therapist, Susie Lou. I want a new therapist, which was my that was my situation in treatment. And by the way, they didn't get me one and then say that I never told them or didn't tell them, and like they made up something because they just forgot. Yeah, they don't have to. If you go into detail about why, they don't necessarily have to share, but they can. So things like that are just requests, and if it's a provider who you have rapport with, then you'll be able to build that trust and know if it's something that they can keep to themselves or not. But just in general, just know that if you are saying that, and again, it's not affecting your safety or someone else's safety, they're not just going to be going out, they told me not to say this, and it's not something that harms them. But I just want everyone here to know that's not how it is for most providers. So I don't think that's something to be very concerned about. I want to quickly touch on 5150s, which is being put on a psych hold. I'm not going to get too deep into the technicalities of this, as it does vary state by state to some degree. But if one of your providers or a crisis resource determines that you are in imminent danger, you can be put on a 5150 psych hold, which is essentially for at least 72 hours, you will be in a psychiatric facility designed to make sure that you don't harm yourself. If you are also actively homicidal, you can be put on a hold to make sure that you don't harm other people. And this is something I don't think that you should fear, because your life does matter. And no, a psychiatric hold is not comfortable. It's not comfortable at all. But also, living a life of suicidal ideation or homicidal ideation is also not comfortable. So at least with a 5150, at least when you're in a psychiatric facility, you can be surrounded by resources or even be referred to resources when you're released that can help you move to the path of a happier, healed life, move to the path of healing and getting the treatment that you actually need. If you are someone who wants to share your experience about psychiatric holds, please definitely email me, because this podcast is for us who have ever sought treatment. It's for us who care about making treatment better, and I want to hear from the community. Another thing I want to quickly touch on are group members. Can they share what you say? Can they share where you were? Every group facilitator is supposed to discuss the rules that this is anonymous. So you can't be going on Facebook and saying, oh, I saw Carla K here and she doesn't eat for 3 days, and also I found out what her workout routine is, and I actually think she slays with her workout routine. This is her workout routine, and also her mother's crazy. That is not allowed. You cannot share things about other group members to anyone. You cannot reveal the identity of other group members outside of the group setting. Like, you can't just go on sharing things. It's anonymous, and that is so important. Anonymity is so important. Confidentiality is so important. And if your facilitator has never gone over the rules, if your organization, you feel like the clinic, the provider has never gone over the rules of the group, it is worth your time to go up to them and say, hey, I just want to make sure that everyone knows that this is confidential and anonymous. Can you please make an announcement letting everyone know that they cannot reveal the identities of the people here? I don't do it every time, especially if I'm working with the same people, but every once in a while, I don't want to say every once in a while, maybe like every few groups, especially if someone's new there, you go over the rules and you remind people that it is anonymous. This space is anonymous. We want to keep this safe and sacred and comfortable and not be going around telling people's business. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. You could also leave a comment, but you can email me if you are interested in giving some information about the behavioral health industry to make sure that others can navigate it better and get the help that they need, or just to bring awareness to areas that you want to see improved. Also email me. Remember to check out seedsofgenesis.com, the support page, to learn more about the communities that we will be building. Again, these are going to be workshops and communities led by the community to make sure that we can all be connected again in a world that is so isolating and can be very, very dark and make us feel disconnected. Thank you for tuning in.